on my channel, we talk a lot about different concepts in painting. Well, today we're getting a chance to put all of those concepts into practice. I'm gonna paint a street scene, and I'm gonna show you how I paint it from the very beginning to the very end. So it's a much longer video today than what I normally do, but I think that you guys will find this helpful. Enjoy. Before we dive into today's lesson, I have a free gift for you. Watercolor is not a very forgiving medium. It's hard to correct. So having a plan from the beginning is crucial. That's why I created this free video lesson, 7 Secrets of Fresh, Powerful Painting. I give you 7 powerful tips that will help you plan your painting, mindfully paint your scene, and most importantly, know when you are done and avoid overworking. Many students have already watched this video lesson and are seeing great results, and I know that it can help you out as well. All you have to do is follow the link in the description down below, and you can start painting more fresh and powerful paintings. All right, back to the video. Street scenes come along with some special challenges. There's usually a lot of small shapes, and it takes some work to simplify the scene, to find connections in the scene, and really make it something that is paintable. Today's video is a little longer than usual. I thought it would be nice to show you how I paint a scene from the very start to the very end. So we're gonna go through the colors that I use, how I mix them, the different brushes that I use, and feel free to paint along. The first thing I notice when I look at this scene is there are a lot of positive and negative shapes. There's a lot of bright areas and some darker areas of this scene. The thing that catches my eye first is the brightness of the top of this tower here versus the sky that's behind it. And so a lot of times it's tempting to paint the sky as the lightest part of our scene, but in this particular scene, the sky is darker than the top of that tower. And if you squint at your reference photo, you notice that the face of this building is also lighter than the sky. So that's something we're gonna be thinking about today. If those are similar in value, it's okay. I can kind of define it with the shadow side of that building. So maybe we're dropping in the warmth on this tower at the same time as the cool of the sky. One difference about this scene is when I wet my painting down, when I pre-wet everything, I'm going to try to cut around the top of this tower. So when I go in with my sky wash, I can have a hard edge around that. So again, we'll see how things go. One of my goals today is to find connections in the middle value and simplify these cars that I'm seeing too. So that's part of the goal in today's painting. So I'm gonna go ahead and pre-wet both sides of my paper here. So on the back, I'm going over the entire paper. And on the front, I'm going to try to cut around the top of this tower to give myself a little more control there with that edge. If that doesn't turn out that way, it's not that big a deal. We'll figure out another way to paint it. Even if I need to use a little bit of gouache in that part of the painting, that's fine too. I'm not gonna obsess over it, but that's my plan A, is to try to paint around that part of the tower. All right, what I'm gonna do first is lay in some of these lighter values. I'm thinking about the brightest part of the painting, and I'm gonna start with some raw sienna. Maybe a little bit of lavender to neutralize that a little bit. Touch of burnt sienna. Let's see how that looks. I think that looks fine. Go ahead and bring that down to here. I'm okay if a little bit of this warm color bleeds into the sky and vice versa. Like I said, I'm going to come back through with the sky, and I'll be able to define this tower a little bit more once I add the shadow side in. Okay, and the top of the tower I'm going to leave white for now. I'm going to continue with this warmth, getting a little darker. Add a touch more lavender into this. There we go. And just bring that over to there. There's a little more warmth on the roof of this building. Add some burnt sienna into the mix. Just trying to create a good impression of some of these lights and darks. Back to some lavender and some raw sienna. And I'm gonna kind of fill in what will be these buildings back here. A few areas where there's some more color. More raw sienna, more lavender. And just bring that all the way over to this side of the painting here. I'm gonna add a little bit of raw umber, and this will be the color of this tree that I'm gonna cut around. So I'll go ahead and add that in now. All right, I'm gonna just take my damp brush and soften some of these edges here. Just keep this nice and loose. And now I'm going to switch to a larger brush, and I'm going to start thinking about my sky. I want to get that sky in while this edge is still wet. Okay, so it's darkest on top, so I'm going to go cobalt blue. Let's do some cerulean in with that. There's a hint of green in the sky, which you wouldn't guess that there'd be green in the sky. So I'm going to add some of that cobalt teal blue, some more cerulean. I want to make sure I'm getting this strong enough. Okay, I'm going to start at the top, go all the way across, and work my way down. I'm painting right through that pole over on that right side of the painting. I'm not going to worry about preserving that. If I want to go in with some gouache later, I can. I think I need a little more strength at the top of the sky. Yeah, that's better. And as I come down, I will be adding a little more water, a little more cerulean into the mix. And I want to think about the top of this tower while I'm doing this as well. And I don't need to obsess with that shape, just get a nice little bit of white that's left behind. Okay, do the same thing on the other side. Okay. Okay, it's not perfect, but I think that will do for what I need it to be. So I'm going to take some paint off my brush, add a little more cerulean in, and just keep this going down here. Keep it going down. All right, and now I didn't quite, I kind of took away some of this, the top of this tower. I'm gonna get a little bit of that back now. I just have a damp brush. And also, it's kind of nice to give a variety of edge. If one side is soft and one side is hard, it's kind of nice too. So I'm kind of softening up one side of this. Makes it look a little more interesting as well. Okay, I'm going to get a little bit of blue on this smaller brush. And there's a middle part. You can see the sky through, so take that out. Okay, same thing on the next level. Take a little bit more of this blue. And I'm keeping a paper towel in my hand and taking a little bit of the excess moisture off before I do this. I don't want a big bloom or anything like that. I just want a hint of blue in some of these areas. All right. I think I can make a little adjustment there. Yeah. All right, that's enough obsessing with that. Let's see, I'm gonna move in, keep this first wash going down, moving down the page. There are some trees along the scene. I wanna go ahead and drop in some green right now while I still have damp paper to work with. Some light values of my green. So I'm using some cobalt turquoise with some raw sienna. Just find some areas where we want some of those soft values. And add a little more warmth. Maybe some raw umber, a little more raw sienna into that. Now I'll be going back and obviously putting in a lot more value in these areas, but sometimes it's nice to have some soft edges in this color that will accent and go along with what you paint in your next wash as well. Let's see. I want that tree smaller or taller? I think let's have the tree go about to here. Let's throw some green into this area. All right, any other trees in the background here? Little bits of green in some places. All right, I think that's good for the trees. Now I need to think about some of these individual colors that are in some of these cars. I'm gonna add some lavender into this warmer mixture, maybe some raw sienna and lavender. Maybe a little bit of Payne's gray. Looking for just kind of a lighter gray color. I'll move into this closer car, this one here, and connect that. We need some gray, so I'm adding a little more of this blue into that gray mixture that I already have. I'll be going back over all this again, but I need to establish these values, or this color on this car. I think that gray works fine. Now I can throw some of this. There's a shadow area over here that'll be a lot darker. I can put some of that in there right now. All right, and the colors of these cars don't have to match the reference photo exactly. You can do what you want with those. I do think it'd be kind of nice to have this light colored SUV right there. And then there's a cooler colored vehicle. I'm gonna add some cerulean, some of my cooler. Oh, this is kind of interesting. The tops of these cars are reflecting the sky color. So I'm gonna put some of that blue that I have already mixed up into some of the tops of the cars. I see it in a few different spots. And let's make this car blue over here. Just connect that with the background. Some more of this bluish gray on this car. This van is a warm color. Mix some raw sienna, kind of a warmer gray is what I'm thinking here. And that back is pretty bright, the back of that car. So maybe a little more warmth on that. Back to some of this cool gray color. Over to here. And I think that I'm ready to move into the road. Now I want that road to be darker than the sky. So what I'm gonna do now is take the blue off of my painting. I'm pretty much done with that blue for now. So I'm gonna take that blue off my palette. Rinse off my large brush. Let's mix up a nice gray. Let's go raw sienna, Payne's gray, maybe throw some cerulean in there. Lavender. And we're gonna start with this pretty neutral gray back here. And go ahead and rinse some of that off of there. Add some raw sienna into the mixture. We're going to warm it up a little bit. Let me throw some burnt sienna in there too. A little more lavender. Yeah, I like that better. A lot of this in the foreground will be in shadow. Let's go a little stronger. Burnt sienna, lavender, some neutral tint. I'm going to add some cobalt blue into the mix. A little more lavender. I'm going to cool it off just right now while it's wet. Just throw some of this in there. That'll be a lot stronger by the time I'm done with it. And then let's move into some grass here. we are almost done with our first wash here. Soften that edge. Add a little coolness. If I go back and I want to put that pole here, there's a part that's in shadow. Go ahead and add that in there. All right, before I call it good on the first wash, I like to take a damp brush and find some highlights. If I use a damp brush, sometimes I can take out a few little highlights where I want the light to be the brightest. It's kind of my one last chance to make any changes to these lightest values while it's still damp anyway. A few little highlights on the cars. The back of this car is a lot brighter. Straighten out this edge a little bit if I can. There we go. That's good. There's a pole here for the stoplights. I wonder if I can take out some highlight for that. I don't need to obsess with these things, but sometimes these small little value changes make a big difference when you get to the final painting. Okay, at this point, I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to let everything dry, and we'll come back in and we'll start thinking about the middle value and the darks that we need to really make this light stand out and really make the time of day seem believable. So we'll come back in and move into that, and then get into our details and bring the painting all together. At this point, my paper is mostly dry enough to move into the next phase. What I want to do before I start painting is I'm taking a look at the scene overall. Now my game plan is to look for one large connected shape. So I see the roof on the top of this building connected to some trees that comes back down into the shadow side of the car, and that comes into this shadow side of the car that connects with that shadow. The shadow side of this tower that comes over here and connects with these smaller pieces. And the shadow sides of this car and their shadow on the ground. So that's what I plan on painting in this stage. Before I start painting, especially in this part of the process, I like to pre-mix some colors that I'm going to need. Give me a little more room to work with there. So one color I see is the rooftop, which looks like some burnt sienna, some neutral tint, not that much neutral tint though. Maybe some raw sienna into that. A dark warm color. A little more raw sienna, a little more burnt sienna. And I just took away that green, but now I realize I'm gonna need some more. Cobalt turquoise with some raw sienna. That's kind of my base green, and then I can warm it up or cool it off. Okay, so I have those two things ready. I'm gonna take one more brush and mix some dark, cool colors. So I'm gonna use some lavender, some neutral tint, a touch of cobalt blue. Just looking for a darker, cool color. Maybe a little bit of cobalt teal blue. Some of the shadow sides of the cars and things like that. All right, so I have a few brushes loaded up and a few different puddles of color. So let me start here. Side of that roof of that building is going to define the side of this tower. All right, and then move right into this tree. Sometimes I use my finger to kind of smudge and blur an edge a little bit. I like that better. Make sure the top of this is straight. All right, and then there's some more green as I move down to here. I'm gonna add some Payne's Gray to some of this green and take a little bit of this blue that I've mixed in. And while this is damp, I'm adding a little bit of soft shadows in these trees. I'm going to move into the shadow side of that car using some of this cooler color that I've already mixed up. and there's a darker bit inside the windshield of this car. I want to preserve that light color on the top. Okay, and there's a few more of these trees. I think an important skill in painting is to try to make sure that you're painting random shapes and not get repetitive with your brush strokes. So that's something I'm trying to be mindful of as well. And I'm going to move into the shadow of that car, taking some of this darker, cooler color that I've already mixed. Looking for other ways to connect it with this side of the painting as well. All right, that's about enough with this car, I think. Taking a really thin amount of something warm, whatever's on my palette, and just making a slight connection there. Moving into this car, into the shadow side of that car here. I'm going to warm that shadow up a little bit. Adding some raw sienna into this mixture. So this edge of this building and where we meet this bright car provided a nice kind of stopping point. So I'm moving down into this car, and we're okay if I come in later and do all this, because my main connection I wanted to have happen was here. So I'm not so worried about something not connecting there. So you can look for little places in your painting to give yourself a break or transition to different parts. All right, and I want this cooler dark to connect right in to the darks on this car as well. And again, I want to move to some warmth. There's the warm color seems to be reflecting off the road into some of these cars as well. So it's kind of nice to add some variety into that. Sometimes you just go with it and you don't know if it's going to make much of a difference or if it's the right thing. And you just move forward. Add a little more. Let's see. Kind of strengthen this up with some Payne's Gray. I'm moving right into the tires of the car and the dark shadow under the car. Don't want to get too neat with all of this. Okay, and the darker part of this vehicle can connect right into that. All right, we're making some progress here. Again, there's maybe a highlight here that I want to play with while this is still wet. All right, I don't really like that separation. I think it looks better to make that all one shape. Okay. Well, the other car needs a back window as well. All right, let's move into the side of this tower. Let's go some Payne's Gray, some lavender. All right, and the edge of that tower helps define the top of that car. more details here. I'm not trying to get everything exactly right, but it does need a little more polish. Okay, let's connect that shape into some of these other darks in the back. So I'm trying to look at those shapes in the background and find a way to abstract and create an impression of what I'm seeing back there without getting too swamped with all the details. I see something here that I'd like to correct, and that is I left a gap between these two cars, and I'm not sure why I did that. All right, I'm continuing to work my way around the scene. And find connections where I can. Some of this I'm kind of inventing as I go. Considering making this car red like it is in the reference photo. I think I'm gonna try that, see how I like it. All right, now I'm going to move back into this car. Some lavender, Payne's gray. I'm just kind of using some of the stuff that's already on my palette. some a little more strength here. Rinse that off. And this little area here where the light is hitting the car, I want to soften that edge. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and move into the shadow for that car. There's that wheel that's behind this one. It kind of helps define that one a little bit. And that's gonna connect right to the shadow on the ground. And there's a good chance I'm gonna need to go through with some darks at the end of this and just tweak things a little bit, add a little more strength and finishing touches to some of these cars, and that's fine. All right, it's time to move into this area of the painting. Paint this tree and move into some of the other detail work. And we'll be wrapping this thing up here soon. All right, more tree painting. Need to mix up some more greens. Cobalt turquoise, raw sienna, maybe a little bit of raw umber, trying to make sure I mix up enough paint. All right, so we want this to be pretty strong. It's gonna add more of a sense of light to this scene. And I wanna remember, as I get down here, there's little parts of this tree that I wanna paint around as well. And I'm still considering cutting around part of this pole here. I haven't decided how I want to handle that. All right, I want to paint a big, loose tree shape. I'm gonna hold my brush a little further back and I have it fully loaded with paint so I can push it around, get some different types of brush marks. Go ahead and cut around part of that. And I'm going to cut around part of this light pole, or the pole for the stoplight as well. Okay, go ahead and reload. Okay, I'm gonna add some lavender into this, maybe some Payne's gray. Just some darks, that's what I'm interested in, some darker shades, some shadow areas of this tree. right. There's a nice little line on the edge of this curb here that will help connect and define kind of what's going on here. So I'm going to get that in. Okay, back to some of these darks. I'm going to get rid of that. Thought it looked kind of interesting, and then it just became a bunch of spaced out, like evenly spaced vertical lines. So like I mentioned before, it's always important to look for repetition, things like that, patterns that you're creating that you're not thinking about. Makes your painting look a lot better if you can be aware of those things. There, that's better. That kind of defines that building a little bit more. Suggest some detail. All right, there's a few parts of the painting that need some more darks. So let's take a step back and assess, kind of figure out how things are looking. trying to find enough darks to make things read believably, but not overwork things. It seems like that's always the challenge here. There we go. Those darks are really helping that part of the painting. There's a little mirror on this car. All right, we are getting there. There's a lot of small details in this one. All right, I'm gonna try to add in this pole here, kind of the shadow side of the pole. Get some of this cooler mixture on my brush. I'm going to go ahead and get this shadow done in the foreground. Okay, let's take some lavender, Payne's Gray. Go ahead and mix in some of this green that I have. A little more Payne's Gray. I want to make sure that this is dark enough. All right, the shadow kind of follows the edge of the road here. Connect that over there. All right. I'm going to take my spray bottle and cover up part of this. Just spray the foreground a little bit. I like the softness that gives me there. I'm gonna add a little bit of cobalt blue and Payne's Gray into this. All right, this can go all the way over to here. Just fill that in. I think I need a little more strength there. Payne's Gray, Cobalt Blue, Cerulean. A little more strength. All this will fade a little bit as it dries as well. And there's a car here on the edge of the painting. Go ahead and paint that in shadow as well. All right, and there's a shadow side of this car on the edge of my painting, and I want to connect that just like that. And I need some more Payne's Gray and a little more strength. On the bottom of this car for the shadow. There we go. I'm looking for a warm dark, so I'm using some raw sienna, Payne's Gray. I want to get these stoplights in. I don't want these to kind of take over, but I do want to include them. Trying not to have everything look too perfect here. A little more definition to that pole. One thing I can do is I can look over at this tree, decide if there's anything I need to scratch out, any highlights. Looks a little more interesting that way. A few more darks over here. we are nearing the end, even though I've said that a few times. One thing that I think would help this scene is a few nice directional lines. I'm going to take my palette knife and I want a directional line about like that. Yeah, I like that. Another one right here. If it's too much, you can smudge it in a little bit with your finger. Those lines really help, I think. Yeah, I like that. All right, a few more things that we need. I want some really bright red, so I'm using my cadmium red. And some cadmium orange. And I don't need a lot of this red, but I like the brake lights on this car. Take a little bit off my brush. And a couple more spots here. Okay, really thick red paint for the stoplights. All right, take a step back here. Couple darks here on this car, maybe. Need a little more punch on some of this contrast here. Just want to reinforce some things on this tower over here. I wanted a few marks here. I think I need a little more strength in the foreground here. So I'm gonna load up a brush. I'm gonna take a lot of what's already on my palette. Maybe add some Payne's Gray into this green. Maybe some more lavender. I want to add a little more strength in this part of the painting. Okay, a couple more things I'm thinking about. I haven't used any gouache in this painting yet, but I'm considering adding in a few highlights here and there. It's a bright day, the light is catching some poles back there and other light colored objects and reflecting back to us. And it might be a nice touch just to add a little bit more punch to the light if I add a few little highlights around in the background. So to do that, I'm going to take a small synthetic brush. I'm going to get it damp. And I'm using ivory white gouache. And I want to load up my brush and get a thick amount right on the tip of my brush like that. Just a little bit of sparkle, some more highlights. This is good for kind of breaking up areas of the painting that might seem a little monotonous. Now I can see some areas on the edge of my tower here. I want to add just a few highlights to bring some of that back. My sky, I painted that wet into wet, and my sky kind of bled into the warmth there. There's a bell inside the tower. There might be two of them, I'm not sure. But there's something in this little window here. There's two more things I'm considering doing. There's a little highlight on this pole for the red lights. It's not even showing up. Let me add a little more gouache to my brush. considering doing a really thin warm wash. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go for that. Find a clean area of my palette, a little bit of raw sienna, burnt sienna. I think a little bit more color on that would highlight it more. Let's try that. Yeah, I like that. I hope it was helpful for you to see how I work through a painting from beginning to finish. As always, if you have any questions that you'd like me to address in a video, please leave those in a comment below. I would love to hear from you. So keep working, keep practicing, and I will see you next time.